Behind the Built Environment, the podcast from BESA, the UK's leading trade body for the building engineering services sector.
Hello, I'm David Frise, Chief Executive of BESA, and welcome to our new podcast, Behind the Built Environment. And today I'm delighted to welcome our first ever guest, Lorna Stimpson, Chief Executive at LABC.
Thank you.
Lorna's career in public service building control spans over 30 years, in roles from building control surveyor up to senior managerial positions. Lorna joined LABC in 2008 as Business Development Director, advancing to Deputy Managing Director in 2015 and Chief Executive in 2019. Lorna has a proven track record in delivering complex projects and strategic reform. She works with DLUC, HSE, the National Fire Chiefs Council and Local Government Association as a member of the Joint Regulators Group, defining, piloting and testing the new regulatory approaches. She sits on the Industry Competence Committee and the Fire Protection Board. And Lorna is a board director of LABC, the Construction Industry Council and the Building Safety Competence Foundation. It's a wonder you've got time to come and see us today, to be honest, with all of that, Lorna. A busy life.
It's a busy time. So busy time for the construction industry generally. So yes, and I think we're all feeling the same at the moment.
And how did you come into the industry? What was your entry point into this?
I became a trainee building control surveyor at 16, and I've never looked back. It's the best career choice. We've just been taking on trainee building control surveyors, and I can honestly say to them that I wouldn't change a thing about my career. And the 30 years in building control surveying, probably not quite 30 years, but in building control surveying was just fantastic. Fantastic. I would do it all again.
That's good then. If you're getting sort of, you get so senior in your career and you do it all again, then you must have made the right choice.
Yes.
We'd like to start off all these podcasts with a quick fire question. So yes or no, if possible.
Okay,
to
I'll
these.
try.
So, and Building Safety Act is clearly the dominant thing for you over the last few years. So quite a few of these will be around Building Safety Act. So is the Building Safety Act the most important change in construction in your career?
Absolutely. That wasn't yes, was it? I'm sorry. Yes.
Even more affirmative than yes. Does it cover all buildings?
Yes.
Is everyone in construction impacted?
Yes.
Will the Building Safety Act result in behavioural change in the industry?
It should. Yes.
Will the industry be better because of it in 5 years?
Yes.
And do good companies, those who are competent and compliant, have anything to fear from the change?
No.
Great, thank you. But all yes and no, so that was good, and an absolutely. So that's a huge piece. So could you just start off by just describing what you understand the Building Safety Act is about and why it's so important for the industry?
That's a difficult question. Why is it so important and what is it about? It's about putting right the wrongs that we've had for so many years in construction, I think. And it is fundamentally about cultural change. And I know that is it could be seen as quite a fluffy thing. It's not something that you can pin down, but it is about people doing the right thing for the right reasons, and consciously doing that. So it's about competence, it's about culture, and it's about putting safety before profit and a legislative process and framework by which that is the driving force. And I truly believe that the Building Safety Act, if implemented appropriately, will do all of those things.
So to make the building process safer, more certain, would you say, over that period of time?
So. Yes.
And to drive, we talked earlier, or you said you answered yes to behavioural change. So it's not just process. It's not a tick box exercise. It requires people to change the way they operate and view the operations.
Without a doubt. And you know, I'm obviously heavily involved in building control, and we are at the sharp end of that. building control is becoming a regulated profession, or has become a regulated profession, and so we're leading that change. I think the work that I do on the Industry Competence Committee as well is about driving cultural change across the whole industry, and that's about attitudes. That's about people understanding what the legislation is trying to achieve, and the fact that legislation is trying to drive safer buildings.
I guess with all change of that nature, you get we always divide them into threes. So you get 33% immediately get it and change, 33% wait for something to happen and then change, and you get 33% who never change. Where do you see us on that spectrum at the moment? I see quite a lot of, the top third really going for it. Are we really getting into that second segment yet?
In building control, we certainly are, because we've had a deadline and we've had to work to it. In terms of construction, I think it will take a long time, and a long time to filter down. The driver for this change was the Grenfell tragedy, and that was 7 years ago now. And dare I say it, the impact fades from people's memories if it's not something that's in your mind all of the time. And it is obviously in ours, because I'm working, closely with the Building Safety Regulator and DLUC as part of this programme. And so we live and breathe it every day. And other people can be forgiven for not having been touched by the implementation yet. But I think the whole idea is that, gradually over the years, this new way of working, the cultural change that we've talked about, the behaviours will start to trickle down throughout the industry. But construction is an unusual industry, and I think it will take some time. And there are it's also a massive spanned industry, isn't it? I think we were talking earlier, and you said something about from the shard to the shed, and that is construction, isn't it? That is the massive breadth of construction, and how long is it going to take for these new behaviours to come down to those people working on the shed? Is going to take a long number of years, but it will happen. I'm very sure it will happen. Whether it'll be in my lifetime or career, I don't know, but it will happen.
Let's hope determined. Because I guess my career will end roughly the same time as yours, and I would really like to have seen something happen by then. I was at an event last night at the Tower of London from the Mechanical Contractors of Ontario. They held their conference in London. Their president said that they counted the number of cranes in London alone. It was over 100. They were staggered by the amount of work going on. Are you concerned about the resources available to planning and building control departments to actually deliver that, so they're not delaying the whole process?
I don't think there'll be any further delay than there ever would have been. Capacity in local authority building control. Will we ever have enough people? I don't know. How many is enough? I don't know, but certainly not. Impacting on delays to construction. The registration of building control professionals has now, gone through that process, and we continue to work towards full implementation. But what we're also doing within LABC, with massive support from English and Welsh governments, is to bring new recruits into building control. So we know that we were an ageing profession. We know that there was, a lot of people in the latter end of their career, at this moment in time in building control. And so we've been very, very conscious to bring in as many new starters and trainees into building control as we possibly can. And we've done that over the last 12 months. We've taken on about 130 building control surveyors, and we continue to do that with government funding. All whilst we're losing people at the top end of their careers to retirement, and as we would naturally, we're bringing people in at the bottom end to replace them and to backfill those more experienced people that we're losing. And it's all about the training. It's all about competence and building that professional network again, which is something that's very, very much part of our strategic direction.
The press will always focus on negative stories because that's that's what people want to read by and
Yes.
large. You don't hear the good news stories. So how useful was the 3-month delay announced by government to building control officers complete that registration process? And I'm assuming you agreed with that decision to delay.
I wrote to the building safety regulator and Welsh government to request not a delay but an extension, and that's what we've been given, an extension to the deadline, just to allow people to go through the process. And I think what perhaps industry don't generally understand is it isn't just a registration process. So building control surveyors have got to prove their competence as part of that registration. So through an independent company organisation, LABC's organisation that we set up some time ago, the Building Safety Competence Foundation, is gaining UCAS accreditation in 17024. To be able to assess the competence of building control surveyors. And so the surveyors have got to go through that really rigorous process to get their proof of competence before they're able to register. So it's not a simple registration process. And that 3-month extension to the deadline that the BSR Welsh Government gave 6 months extension to the deadline, very much welcomed by the industry and by LABC, because it has given us that opportunity to get more professionals through this process. The building control professionals are they're willing, they are ready and able, and going through that programme as we speak. So I think come July and in October for Wales, we will have the vast majority of current building control professionals registered in the system and practising as registered building inspectors.
So we represent mainly tier 2 contractors, although they typically can now do more than half the work on a project. But tier 2s and below, they're very time strapped. There's, I think, still a lot of confusion in the industry about what's covered and how it's going to impact them. As a tier 2 contractor, what do you think they need to know, and what should they prioritise in the way they operate in the future?
I think it's fair to say that many people who aren't involved necessarily directly in HRBs, so higher risk buildings, think that maybe the Building Safety Act doesn't impact on them. It does. The legislation has changed, and anybody who has an impact on a building, whether it be a subcontractor, the main contractor, they're what is now called duty holders. And so they have a duty to do their work in a certain way, and most of that is about competence and knowing their abilities. And so whilst that might not necessarily have filtered down to your members yet, they are duty holders. And that duty holder role doesn't just apply to HRBs, the tall residential buildings. It applies to every piece of construction. So whether it be a kitchen extension or the shard, there are duty holders. And that duty holder isn't just the main contractor or the principal designer, the principal contractor, principal designer. It's everybody who has an impact on that building, and so or on that design. So they are duty holders. And they have responsibilities, and part of that responsibility is to understand their competence. Now, maybe at this moment in time, there isn't a requirement for them to prove that competence or be on a register. They are expected to understand their competence and their sphere of competence, and the grey areas around what they are competent to work on, what they have. And competence, don't let's forget, is about skills, knowledge, experience and behaviours. So it's not just about what you learnt in a book. So have you worked on that type of building before? Are there things that you don't quite understand? And it's your responsibility as a duty holder to understand where your skills and knowledge and experience and behaviours lie.
Interestingly, today we've got a meeting in Rotherwick House, which is where our offices are, to discuss competence and the apprenticeship for ductwork. We've got 40 ductwork contractors coming in to do that. I guess the point I'm getting across here, that many of those competencies haven't really been fully defined yet. How long do you think the industry has to get that in place so that there's something to define competence against, so someone who has a duty of care can understand what competence looks like?
I think that many professional bodies, many organisations are already going down that route that you're starting to go down now. I think it's absolutely the perfect time for these disciplines, quite unique disciplines, to start to understand what good looks like. And I think what you're doing is what needs to happen. But that can only be done by the industries themselves. You can't say to you can't tell building control what good looks like in building control if you're not from a building control profession. And it's the same with your members. So it's for them to decide what good looks like and start to, as you say, develop the newcomers into that industry. With that blueprint of what good looks like in a competent person in your industry. But that can't be done to you. That is for industry to do it themselves. And that shows a mature industry.
Well, that's what we're trying to develop. We've operated a competence assessment standard for 25 years, and it's only now just beginning to come into its own. But that's because it's third-party accredited.
Yes.
And crucially also ask the question that many PQ processes don't, is that can you do the job? Which seems bizarre that we've asked, have they got insurance? Have they got policies in place? But the question about, are you actually competent to do the job, never comes into question.
No. And that's the difficult question, isn't it? That's where culture comes in. That's where behaviours and ethics comes in. Have you done this before? If you haven't, can you find out how to do it? Are you competent to work on that scheme? So absolutely, your question is perfect. Can you do the job? Not just do you want to do the job?
And is the price right?
And is the price right? Yeah.
So do you see, many people have suggested that it's the end of value engineering as it currently exists, which is a euphemism for I need the price cut. Do you see that ending with the Building Safety Act really beginning to bite?
I think it depends, the extent that you're going to go with value engineering. If you're impacting on safety, then yes, it's the end of value engineering, but that should have never have been a thing. Value engineering shouldn't be to reduce something from compliance to non-compliance by using substandard materials or substandard labour. That should not be a thing. So it's about quality, isn't it? So value engineering, no, I don't see personally. There's no reason why you can't do things just as safely or compliant or as compliant. But maybe a little bit cheaper, but not when you're compromising safety and standards. Absolutely not.
So many people have also questions about when it will really start. I think I used the term, when will it really bite? And many people are suggesting that we need some prosecutions and then people will go, now we'll take some notice. How long do you think we are away from the industry fully understanding the consequences of the Building Safety Act?
I think, as you say, until people start to be prosecuted, people don't sit up and notice. And I don't think the HSE, who obviously the Building Safety Regulator is formed within the HSE, I think we all know that they don't, they don't kind of stand off from prosecuting when they need to. So if it needs to happen, they will serve their notices.
So pre-Grenfell, I guess, and pre the Building Safety Act, there was always, I felt, the perception in the industry that if building control didn't spot something, or Clerk of Works, for example, then we've got away with it. And actually, the building I live in, that was the response of the developer that, well, building control signed it off. But so there was always the perception that building control was somehow fully responsible for things and not able to do things properly. How has the industry responded to that?
That was absolutely the perception before. It was never a fact, It was always the responsibility of the person carrying out the work to comply with the legislation. Building control are there to secure compliance, to, if they see non-compliance, to do something about that. Things haven't changed, but now what has changed for across the industry is that there will be an expectation for that principal contractor to say that they have complied with the legislation, and that is their application for completion. So entirely changed, turned on its head. So the perception was wrong before, but what the legislation has done is made it clearer that it is the duty holder's responsibility to comply. So just because building control didn't happen to pop onto site when they were doing something inappropriate, doesn't mean to say that they could continue to do something inappropriate. And again, it comes back to culture and behaviours. Why is that okay? Just one, we've been interviewing recently, and I have said this before, but we were interviewing recently for trainee building control surveyors, and one of the questions was about integrity. What does integrity mean? And obviously that question is because for building control or anybody in our industry, you've got to have integrity. And one young person, their answer to me was, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's watching. And that was absolutely perfect. And I think if the whole of the construction industry used that, or just kept that in the back of their mind, then we would have a safer construction industry, would have a safer built environment. And integrity and ethics is the thing for me.
And so would you advise our members to have evidence, a full bank of evidence of how they have complied with the package of work they've done at the time?
And this isn't meant to be something that is difficult or hard to do or an imposition. This is just proving that you've done what you should do. In the same way with building control surveyors now are having to prove competence and register with the regulator. That's not about doing something different than they've done before. But Dame Judith, in her report, was really, really clear. She wanted proven, measured competence, not just I say I'm competent or I passed an exam 30 years ago and therefore. This is not anymore. The construction industry is not, pass an exam once, practice for life. And I think that that's got to be the same for every part of our industry. You've got to keep up to date. We know that construction products alone change so often. It's such a massively innovative, area that how can you stand still? And so that constantly keeping yourself up to date is part of being a built environment professional, and so very important.
So, Lorna, just to summarise what we've heard today, to make sure that I've kind of fully grasped this, the Building Safety Act is the key legislative change over the last few years. It affects the whole industry. I think we said the shard to a shed, everything and everybody. It requires cultural change, ethical behaviours on a scale that we haven't seen before, and people need to do the right thing. And I think we said, even when people aren't watching you, it's for the industry to decide competence, what competence is, and indeed, I guess, what compliance is from that. And that Tier 2 contractors or our members should always evidence their compliance, have a record of it for the future. And it's your responsibility to provide that evidence. Nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Certainly not building control.
No.
I think we've reached the end of our time. So I've got one final question, and that is really, do you leave, or are you currently optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the industry?
Optimistic, but that's because it's Thursday. So if it was Monday, maybe not. No, I'm definitely optimistic because, I can only see good things. It's been difficult. There have been some hard decisions. There will be hard times coming, for the whole industry. But we've got to be better as an industry. We've got to be better, and I think that we will be.
Lorna Stimpson, Chief Executive at LABC, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Mark your calendars for the prestigious BESA Industry Awards, scheduled for October the 17th at the esteemed Brewery, London. This flagship event is dedicated to celebrating and rewarding excellence in building services. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your business. Enter the BESA Industry Awards and showcase your achievements and innovations to a panel of esteemed industry expert judges. It's your chance to be recognised as a true industry leader and put your organisation in the spotlight. Visit thebesa.com now to explore the various categories and to secure your place among the best in the industry.
And now to industry news. This is the week that T. Clark were acquired by Regent Acquisitions for £90.56 million, taking them from a public company back into private ownership. Interesting comparison with the failure of MJ Lonsdale recently. So there's still plenty of flux in the market and some consolidation, no doubt, to come. Having just interviewed Lorna Stimpson from LABC, it's interesting to note as well that the Grenfell inquiry has been further delayed, and we will see when that finally gets published and the impact that has. In BESA news, BESA are very proud to be the competition partner for refrigeration and air conditioning along with Mitsubishi and Refcom. The national finals will be held in November, with the World Girls Finals being held in Shanghai, China. BESA have also launched TR19 Air, along with complimentary courses from our approved suppliers. That is an opportunity to evidence your competence and compliance, as we discussed earlier in the podcast. And in Scotland, new build heat standards have been introduced, which came into force on the 1st of April. And finally, I had a letter published in the Financial Times, which you've no doubt all read, about boiler pricing strategies and the consequences of government consistently changing policy at the last minute. A quick reminder that we operate as BESA the Competence Assessment Standard, a 3-part standard, a business management review, a technical audit, and organisational capability, which is your opportunity to evidence to those duty care holders your competence and compliance. Crucially, we ask the question that many PQ processes don't, is, can you do the job? And on that note, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Built Environment podcast from BESA. If you like what you heard today, then please follow and rate us on your favourite podcast app. Come and join us over on LinkedIn, BESA Group, and carry on the conversation. And if you want to find out more about joining the BESA community, then please visit thebesa.com to start your journey with us today.